Hello everyone, and sorry for the very slight delay, but I see that some of you are still joining the room, so that's nice. Roger and I have been sorting out some slight technical difficulties. I'm Nicola Solomon, as you may know by now, the Chief Executive of the Society of Authors, and this is the third in our afternoon tea series, running for the next 12 weeks. All these sessions are free, but if you could afford to donate a few pounds to the Authors Emergency Fund to support authors in financial difficulty, it's highly appreciated, and we'll put up the links on the screen. We're very lucky to have Roger McGough joining us this week. Today's format is going to be a quick intro from me. Roger and I are going to chat for about 30 minutes. He was going to show you around his workroom, but now we're nearer the hub, so we'll see around the room he's in, and then about 15 minutes of audience questions. If you've got any questions for us, try and put them in the chat, and I'll try and pick them up as we go along. Like everyone we've had, he hardly needs any introduction, but that doesn't stop me. Roger McGough is a poet, a performance poet, a broadcaster, a children's author, and a playwright. He originally worked as a French teacher and joined the scaffold, having a #1 hit in 1968 with Lily the Pink, and he's just confirmed to me that Elton John was a backing vocalist. He came to fame as a poet with the 1967 Penguin anthology in the Merseysound with Adrian Henry and Brian Patton, which many of us of my age remember, I suspect, and which remains one of the best-selling poetry collections of all time. He's written many books of poetry for both adults and children, as well as several plays. He presents the BBC Radio 4 programme Poetry Please and performs his own poetry. He's president of the Poetry Society and an SoA council member. And before I start asking him a few questions and show you his workspace, I've got something to show you. This is my copy of In the Glass Room, which I picked up.
Who's that on the front? Who's that guy on the front?
Oh. Just want to show you that this is my 6th form history prize.
There you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a long time that I've been a fan. I'm now going to, if I can do this, make myself, see if we can do this one. And there we are. So I'm going to float in the corner and ask you questions. Okay. Can you start by giving us, you can't now give us a short tour of your workspace and your creative routine, but you can tell us about it.
Yes. Yes, we're all set upstairs in my study, and I practiced, moving the camera to show you all the exotic things in my room. Ho, like books. But of course, the internet went down inevitably. So with my wife Hilary, shot down here to the room downstairs. So I practice the piano, and we'll do it from here if that's all right. But in my workspace, I work at a desktop, and nearby I have a number of books that are always on hand, including my thesaurus, Roger's thesaurus, which I'm using for years. It's very cobwebby, use it all the time, and a few rhyming dictionaries. And people sometimes surprised to find that you need a rhyming dictionary, but it's the process really of looking things up and what rhymes with moon, and then you go to a book and it's not that you never really find the word you're looking for there, but it's the process of looking and thinking beyond what you're seeing that I enjoy. It's so time wasting in a good way. So I have that books, and the rest of the books around, of course, are books by poets I admire and have admired over the years: Norman MacCabe, Charles Causley, Adrian Mitchell, so forth and so on and so on. So loads of good poets.
And those are the things you need around you, but what kind of mindset do you need in order to write? Are there any essential rituals for you?
Not really. I mean, and in a sense, this isolation has been all right for me, as it has for many writers, of course. And as you say, I left university and began teaching, when I was 20. And then when I was 24, I took early retirement and haven't worked since. I haven't had a proper job. So I've never sort of gone into the same place every day and met people, and I've missed that. It's a nice thing to do, inevitably. So I've always been sort of lonely and gregarious at the same time. But what I miss, of course, is going and doing Poetry Please regularly, going up to Broadcasting House, and also doing performances, doing gigs, either on my own or with my three friends, the Little Machine musicians. And of course, this is the time, very busy time for me of doing, should be in the SoA Festival. And of course, then there'd be Hay Festival, Edinburgh Festival, and all over the town. And so I miss that a lot. I miss that sort of social side and meeting people. But having said that, can't do that like everybody else. So you're left with your own devices, including PCs and internet that won't work. So I've got my pen and paper, and I've been very busy. And I always do. My routine is to wake up in the morning about 5:30, worrying about the world. Not really worrying about the world, worrying about what rhymes with something I've been working on usually. And you usually solve it then, 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock. I can't wait to I'm bursting to get out of bed and start working. And then I fall asleep. And then 9:30, 10. And what was all that about? Then I get up and I go for a joggette around Barnes. It's quite lucky, really, because near where I live is the Thames, River Thames embankment, and a little woods, Barnes Common, Barnes Green. Go for a little run. I really mean joggette. And come back and start work, really. And so as the day goes by, and Hilary and I will go for a walk later on, eat in, and I'll carry on working. And I found, inevitably, been writing poems about what's happening to us in the world.
It's interesting that, because I noticed that on your Twitter feed on the 13th of March, you wrote My Coronavirus Haiku, where you said, there are certain things I don't wish to write about, and you are one of them. And yet, but on the 1st of May, you are publishing Catholic Lockdown, and by 6th of May, you're publishing It's Not the Time for Adultery, which I'd love to hear you read, or something else if you'd like to. So in fact, you are working and you are writing about it.
I know, it's funny, because it's not often, I don't feel I often want to do that in a way, but inevitably you do, and you don't want to be mawkish about it. You don't want to tell people what to do. You can't give people advice. You're giving yourself advice, I suppose. I'm writing, and I think it's just a recent poem, just called "When It's Over." What would we have learned from stillness and silence, from sharing, not taking, waiting, not pushing, whispering, not shouting, dawdling, not rushing? When life is back to normal and the hugging is over, will we look beyond ourselves and help the earth recover? This morning, the only cloud on the horizon is a cloud. Without fear of intrusion, it drifts above, full of itself. The sky, has it had a facial? Its skin positively glows. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Superman? No, just a bird, and on a branch, one is singing, the purity of the note. No need today to clear its throat. If trees could smile, this one surely would. In prison for our sins, is now the time to question why. When it's over, what lessons? As the tree, the bird, and the sky.
That was really beautiful. I think there's a lot for us to think about in that, and is echoing what a lot of people have been seeing as green concerns that are coming out of this. Is that something you normally think a lot about and engage with, or has it been this that's made you think more about those kind of poetry for the planet concerns?
I suppose I've always sort of done that, really. My work's veered, between thinking seriously and those sort of point of view, and also being funny as well, and pulling the rug from underneath it, in a sense, and not wanting to be taken too seriously. That was not a problem, but when I started off as a poet, I was unsure of myself in a way, of course, like a lot of poets. I knew I was a poet, but I wasn't know what sort of poet I was, and I sometimes didn't want to appear too clever in a way, so you sort of undermine yourself, undercut yourself, what you're trying to say. And that was a sort of mistake. It took me years to find the balance between being able to be funny and light, also make serious points, I suppose. To do.
And do you think, I mean, I was actually going to ask you that question. So much of your poetry does depend on wordplay, which is fantastic because it makes one really think about it, makes it really accessible. But do you think that having that humor has also been something that's been a bit difficult in your career? I mean, I think what the line I always think of is the Summer with Monica line, you know, your finger sadly has a familiar ring about it. That's a brilliant line. You know, it's funny, it's clever, it makes you think about lots of things, and yet has that made people take you less seriously, or do people understand now?
It does, Nicola, in a sense, when I first began with the Liverpool poets, in a way. And as you know, as you referred to, there's a lot of publicity at the time, and in the 67, and it was seen as a new, you know, breakthrough in a sense, provincial breakthrough of working class provincial poets making their mark. And you know, we did, I think, extend the barriers of poetry, because up until then it had seemed to me to belong to a sort of Oxbridge elite, and to be, you know, to be well been to Oxbridge and published in the very few magazines that are around. But we did sort of break that barrier to some extent. But it did bring with us a lot of rather bad-tempered and criticism and critics referring to you as, you know, working class would-be's. And the three-headed pantomime horse from Liverpool, and you know, and you know, playing to the gallery and all those things. Because if you use, and if you're funny in your poetry, as Wendy Cope and people like that, you get put down as light verse, as if it's not really, you're not really concerned with what it. You know, we could all do that, Roger. We could all do that. Be bothered? Why bother? You know, get back on stage. That sort of thing. And even words like performance poet was always used in a sense, and it's good now because the poetry has changed, as we know. But there was a sense in it of always give you a label. You know, there are poets and there are performance poets. There are comic poets. There are Liverpool poets. There are, you know, but there are poets. Don't forget that. I've forgotten that.
Interesting. And but that's changed now. Do you think that's changed tremendously?
And yeah, living a long time helps. And being quite good at what you do, that helps. Yes, it's been a great uprising of young poets. Gosh, can't keep up. Who are good, and you know, the way that the internet and is available now, so people can reach out there much easier. With its sort of caveats, in a way, sometimes it's too easy to get your poem out there. And I think a lot of younger poets, I think sometimes can't wait quickly to get out there. Whereas a bit more time spent thinking about it, a bit more rehearsing it, rewriting it before it's ready. When is the poem ready? I don't know. But you know what I mean, Nicola. I sometimes feel that we're in too much a hurry to reach out and make a name for yourself. But it's a great, lovely thing to be able to do, is to write poetry, and I endlessly going on about it when I go to schools, or more these days going into conferences with heads of schools and heads of English, and we talk about the importance of poetry. But it's always seen, as you know, as the arts are, as being something less important. You know, in a sense, it's less commercial. Poetry, you know, as we know, if having worked in the music business briefly, there's money to be made from songwriting, lyric writing. If you can paint, draw, it's commercial, you can sell it. If you can play the piano, as I can't, you can go out there and earn a living. As a poet, very difficult. You can't sell a poet. You can't sell a poem. Anyone can do it. It's not worth anything. The idea is not the poet itself. So poets supposed to be rather ill-treated and sort of very difficult to, you know, into work in the world, commercial world in which we live.
And yet,
I don't know why I'm moaning, but it doesn't matter. It's
not really moaning, but it's very interesting because actually you are skilled in all those art forms, because you do some illustration, don't you? You illustrated your own collection 80, didn't you? And have you
I feel like doing that.
And also you've always, I don't know how much you've been involved in the covers of your books, but they're always very striking. So is that about you in illustration or keeping very firm control? How did that work?
Firm control is good, but I've been lucky in having good people doing it and working with people like Chris Riddell and Peter Blake initially. Peter Blake did some with Monica. Gosh, it was wonderful. With good people.
Just saying.
Yes.
Edition, just saying.
Yeah. So that was always nice, and I've always done, where to take poetry, where to go with your poetry. A couple of years ago, I was invited by the Liverpool Museum, the Liverpool Museum of Liverpool. They invited me up there and said, Roger, we want some poems to put in the gallery. So the first thing you think of is write a poem, put it on a bit of paper, put it on the wall. It'd be nice. Then you think, I was talking with a friend of mine who was a bookbinder, and we talk about how to do this. We thought maybe like sculptures and on a big plateau sort of big. He said, how about so big poem and like on a door shape. So yeah, door shape. So we advertised through Liverpool Echo and got 32 doors sent to us from Liverpool, all over Liverpool, from Goodison Park, Everton's football ground, Liverpool's Anfield sent us one. Arthur Dooley, a famous sculptor, his studio door, and put all these doors. And working with the students from Liverpool John Moores University, I created all these poetry doors, which is great fun. I mean, one side was a poem about a car park, and we had all sort of ledges on the door with like dinky cars going all the way up in the poem. The other side was called Car Park, and we got a big arc, painted a big arc made out of wood, and all these golden carp jumping out. So it's a carp arc. And one door was an objet d'art, D-A-R-T, and it was a dartboard, but darts in and objet. It was just great fun. So you walk in, it's poetry, but it's doors. So I just like taking poems out there, throw them there.
That's so brilliant. And actually, one of the questions that's been asked that I can see here, which says, how do we get children interested in poetry? And I guess that these are some of the ways that you would say.
Very much. I've always been saying, Nicola, that I've got this belief that all children are poets before they go to school. And what I mean by that is the way that, and we all know this, when they're very young, the way they describe the world and see the world around them. My own children saying, Dad, the candle's crying. Oh, the candle's crying. Or, Dad, a bit of the moon slipped off. A bit of it slipped. And that's a wonderful story about a little girl going past Didcot, a power station, saying, oh, look, a cloud factory. Now, these are wonderful. These are all images, poetry. Now, kids, that's how they see the world, try to describe it. And we, as loving adults, parents, teachers, give them information. And I see it as poetry's worst enemy, information. Say, that's not, the candle isn't crying, it's so silly. Go and Google it, you'll find out it's all about atoms and molecules. Go on. And we've got to keep that sort of way of looking at the world. That's what poets do, isn't it? You try to see the world in a way that, we've forgotten we saw the world. Keep that way of being. Don't, on November the 5th, give the children to write a poem about November the 5th. They will all describe what happens. They'll describe the fizzing and the whizzing. This is lovely. This is good. Not blocking the fizzing. But say, no, imagine being that firework. Imagine being that something or other. Try and get inside everything. Don't describe everything. Leave that to the prose writers. Leave that to journalists. Poetry is something more insecure, unsure of yourself, finding out, trying to get in there. It's complicated, but I'm a great believer in the importance of poetry, and the children do, and once they discover it, get hold of it. You don't have to be terribly, terribly intellectual. It helps, it can be, it doesn't matter. But ways with words, that's the way in.
And you have got an exceptional way with words. Did you always have that? Clearly you learn it more, but when did you realise that you had that facility for playing with words?
I don't know, because it was never sort of picked out at school. I was educated in Liverpool, went to grammar school. I'm taught by Irish Christian brothers, very fierce good men and true, but very Irish, very fierce, and wouldn't stand any nonsense. And the strap we used to get the strap, not for being naughty, or they got it for being naughty, but as a teaching method. They got the strap. And that was difficult. So if you were sort of clever with words, you were being cheeky. It was seen as insolence. So wherever I was reacted in class to somebody who gave a funny answer, not the answer's question, maybe a witty answer, you were hit. Hit. So writing poetry when I left school, went to university, was a way of getting back at some of the teachers in a sense. But I'm one of those people, like many writers, I suppose. I'm not the witty person in the group or around the supper table. People nod off when I'm telling a funny story. But I can do it later on. I can put it down in paper. It's that esprit d'escalier, I suppose, all the time.
And then you get the chance to actually say it rather than thinking about it afterwards and hitting yourself. You can save it for later.
That's right. So, and poetry for young people, a good way of getting back at people who've been nasty to you. You can write about them in a poem. You can be anything in a poem, but don't it's not always you. The I in the poem isn't me, except when it's someone handsome and clever. It can be anybody, and that's the thing to be. It can be inanimate, I think. See, here's one did yesterday. Sound like it's called The Poem You're About to Be Read. Sorry, I'm ready for The Poem You're About to Read has not yet been written. Okay. The poem you're about to read has not yet been written. Looks can be deceptive. Ignore the shape on the page, the arrangement of the lines to form stanzas. You could be forgiven to thinking you're in safe hands. The fact that it appears confidently in a book of verse might lead you to believe that it is a poem fully formed, but you'll be wrong. It is not even a work in progress, merely the ghost of an idea come to visit one night. Was it W.H. Auden who said you should never waste a good title? Whoever it was, they were right. That's just a bit of surrealism, really. Don't know why I read that, but it's just I like things that don't necessarily. You don't know when you start the poem where you're going. So you give yourself a title. The poem you're about to read has not yet been written. Does set a challenge to a writer. So I'm a great believer in people ask, what shall I write about? I've dried up, don't know what to do. Now I say just take a title or take the first line of somebody's poem. Carry on with the voyage, then change the words, see where it goes. And I do a lot of quarrying, called quarrying lately, or mining, where you go back to old poems, old books. I've got so many books now, and I've forgotten poems I've written back in the olden days. And sometimes I'll go to a poem. The one you mentioned, Today's Not a Day for Adultery, is one. And I thought that would work in times of the days in which we are living, isolation. So you can look at old poems and refurbish them. Go a different first couple of lines, fine, and then go somewhere else with it. And that's a really good thing to do. You discover things you didn't know that were there. And if it's a poem about, Edward Heath, mentioned, comes in a poem, James Callaghan, fine, of the time, they're historic, but the rest of the poem doesn't need them in it. It rather sways the poem away from it. So you look back at it again, do we need that? No, we don't. Move that away, that sort of stuff. That's how I've been doing a lot.
And you do that's with your own poetry, but how much do you engage with other people's poetry? Because I know that you've done translations of Molière. Also, you did these translations of Franz Wittkamp's original poems, and you said that was a very interesting process. You said that you'd done them more from Axel Scheffer's illustrations than from the translations.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that was interesting. That because the translation from the German, don't speak German, so that translation, and they didn't seem to me to be quite get the joke, if you like. but the Schaefer drawings, wonderful, Alex Schaefer. So I translated the drawings into English, if you like, and which I really enjoyed. The Molières, because I did French at university, but like schoolboy French, I got through sort of degree, scraped through a degree, but I was never a linguist, although I love the French. They introduced me to Baudelaire and Rimbaud, all those French poets. I love that. And also while I was there, of course, Larkin was at university, and I heard Christopher Lowe came to read, so it was quite a good time for me. But I was never a linguist. But suddenly when I was invited by Gemma Bodinay, when the year of Liverpool became the city of culture, would I translate Molière's Tartuffe, first of all, would I translate it for the theatre? I thought, no, can't. I'm not good enough. I'm not good. I always thought that, I'm not good enough. Not good. But when I started to read prose versions, the prose, not poetry, the prose in English, I was able to take that and then develop that. And having read some of Liz Lockhead does some wonderful translations of Molière into Scottish. There are other poets around, Tony Harrison and Dan Mon and so forth. And looking at them and thinking, yes, I can do this. And I became Molière for a few years. He didn't mind. And we got on well. And I kept a photograph of him, painting of him by desk, and I'd refer to him if I didn't want to stray away too much from his. But I wanted to make his poetry, his verse and his stories set in their time, but to appeal to a modern audience. It's tricky, but it's good.
And you said he wouldn't mind. Presumably quite a lot of your work's been translated. Have you had involvement with translators, and do you mind when your work's translated?
No, I enjoy it. Funny, the French is the only language that hasn't been translated in. I should do it myself. But you never know, do you, Nicola? I mean, I've seen my work. I know my work, my Italian translator, Franco Nazi, is very good, and I speak a bit of Italian, and I know that's good. Other times you get poems translated into Turkish, Vietnamese, and no idea what it is. It's very funny. You just get these poems sent to you, and all the book of Turkish, the poems in Turkish, and you don't know which poem it is, but you count the lines and you see where the spacing is, and that must be this one.
Recognize a word or two, I guess, or a name.
Yeah.
But do translators contact you and say, what would you do with this one? Because again, it depends so much on wordplay, and I've heard Ali Smith say that it's incredibly difficult to translate.
It is difficult to translate. I know that, and poets like Christian Morgenstern. Again, I like his work in German, but again, difficult to translate because he does the wordplay as well. It's one of the things we lose in translation. We can't do it, or they'll make their own way of doing it. A good translator will have a go at it, or ignore it, because some poems are, I suppose, untranslatable if they're not. Just had a visitor. A matching. Look, see matches. Look, they're funny.
Yes.
It's Eddie. Say hello. Ooh.
Do you always dress to match your cat, or is this?
I do. Yes. Yeah. You used to have black and white stripe on it. That was pretty cool in those days. Yeah.
And well, nice to see someone coming in and see what. In fact, that moved me nicely on. Obviously, you were talking about inspiration, and you're writing poetry, so you're getting inspiration from news and whatever, but you're not getting out the dinner. You're talking about the dinner table and thinking about things afterwards. You can't do that. Where are you getting inspiration from at this point?
Well, I mean, just from not reading too much news, but inevitably hearing the news going on, and just walking around and just thinking and spending time. The more you write, Nicola, as you know, the more you write, the more you write. The more you write, the more you've written, the more you go back to it and rewrite it and go on. That's a starting point. It can be a never-ending circle. You don't get anywhere, but very often something happens. But I had a book out, came out in March, called Money Go Round, published by Walker Books. Great timing, March. Middle of March, book comes out. Great. Money Go Round, which is a lovely little book, but it's set in this sort of wildwood, in the Toad Hall days. and it's one of my favourite books. When I was at school, one of my first starring roles was a school production of Toad of Toad Hall. Toad of Toad Hall. Now it's Mr. Badger, the definitive Mr. Badger, people used to say. And I've always liked it. So I've got the book. There it is there. Lovely illustrations by Minnie Gray. And I thought, it'd be nice to make it into a musical. Because I'd worked once on an American production, went to New York, Over the Wind in the Willows, by an American production company. And I was brought in as a lyricist. And it actually went to Broadway. But without success, it was all sorts of things went wrong in it. The nearer it got to Broadway, the more my lyrics were moved away and became very American, very American. I was brought in because it was English, but then you're too English, Roger. You're English. We don't. But anyway, they gave me the idea for a lot of the lyrics. I've been working. I love saying this. I just finished a musical. I love saying I just finished. Just finished the musical. Yeah. So I just finished this musical. I gave all the characters in the book. Mr. Badger, Stoat, a song. Each scene now starts off with a song. I love doing that. Whatever happens to it, I don't know. I mean, nothing come to naught. But it was great fun writing a musical. No, I didn't do the music, by the way.
I'm sure you could, though.
Obviously. God.
I'm going to move on a bit to your thoughts on the industry, and particularly what effect is this going to have? You were talking about how easy it is for people to get poems out now, but a lot of people have been relying on performance. How is this affecting poets, and how is it continuing to affect poets? Your World Poetry Society must be.
I don't know. Yeah. Thing is, a lot of people are writing poetry. It's a great impulse to write. I think people have discovering they got the time to write and getting more and more skills at doing it. It's the places where they'll perform the poets and when they'll be published will go on. I just can never quite understand. It comes in waves. I mean, publishers sometimes get behind poetry. Sometimes children's poetry, Puffin will come along, bang in, and they do it. And Jeanette Otter-Barry and people will do that now. And it happens with Faber, Penguin, and other big publishers. And sometimes it sort of becomes out of fashion in a way, and somebody else takes over. But there's a great need for it, and I think maybe the need is ever there. Oh, Chelsea. Just reading about thing about Marino just popped up. I'm sorry, I can't help these things popping up. So the need is always there, maybe greater than before, and the writers are there greater than before. So it may be the thing that will take off. I mean, remember Nicola? Poetry was the new rock and roll. People say poetry is the new rock and roll, and I didn't like that. Well, it never was, shouldn't be. Poetry can't be. It's quiet. It's unassuming. It should be. It's important. Pathetic, did you say?
No, I did not say pathetic. I said reflective.
Yes. Of course it is. And there's a need for it. We all need it. I need it.
And are you missing visiting bookshops, and how are you supporting local bookshops while you're...
Yeah. Funny enough, our local bookshop, Barnes Bookshop, has just moved down the road at the time the lockdown came. So it just moved, about to go into the new premises, lockdown came. But that's a nice new bookshop, so we use that a lot, of course. And of course, bookshops you miss. I mean, just going in there and rearranging my books. You just get my books and put them into the front. If you get one of your books, I haven't got one of mine here. But you get one and you take it out and you put it into the front of that, in front of Caroline Duffy, in front of in front of Simon Armitage and Ted Hughes, like that. And it's good. Then people come in and take it away, throw it away. No, we do that and go into bookshops, see what's going on. That's why I actually read a lot of poetry in bookshops. I'm sent a lot of poetry, as you can imagine. People send me books. I'm very lucky. And people send me poems. So that's how I keep up to date with what's going on.
What are you reading at the moment, either poetry or just generally?
The book I've just finished reading is called Ghost Light by Joseph O'Connor. I like Joseph O'Connor at the Star of the Sea a while ago. And it's a poem about John Synge. the Irish playwright, and about an affair he had towards the very end of his life with a young actress, Maggie O'Connor. Sorry, I've got the name. But it's very quiet and very Irish and beautifully written, very poetic. I enjoy that. I don't read all that much, to be honest with you. My wife reads a lot, and the cat reads, but I leave it to them, really.
I promised I would move on to some questions from others, and this is one that probably moves on from that. By Astley, you talked about Charles Causley earlier, and she said, I can't read Charles Causley's poem Timothy Winters without crying, even though I've read it a zillion times. And she asked if there's a poem that has the same effect on you.
That poem particularly, or any poem? Is that the question?
She said a poem that has that effect.
Any poem. Not quite so much, but lots of poems. I mean, that one particularly, I'm a great fan of. Always loved Charles Causley for his breadth, really, and the way he gets it right. He speaks the language, very approachable, understandable. Talks to you. You feel like he's the teacher you wish you'd had when you were at school. But poems, of course, touch me, move me, and I go back to them. But you're always sort of going on and finding your own things, really, to be honest. Trying to write the next Timothy Winters. And
Mary English asked, do you keep a journal or diary? Not a journal or a diary, but one or the other.
Yes, I have over the years, yes. A lot of my diaries now go up to Liverpool University. They got the up there, what do they call it, archives. But I do, and I've kept a sort of COVID-19 diary. Boring as hell. God, I keep writing. This is so boring. This is so. I try not to be, but it's just a sort of. It's not for publication, really. It's just for myself, in a way. But sometimes when I don't drive, so when I travel anywhere, remember those days, and you get on a train, and I would keep a journal about where I'm going, what I've done, who I met, and that sort of thing. What I read at the time. Keep a diary. Not what I wore. That's not like the Supremes. Supremes, when and a lot of girl bands go around, they always write down what they wore. Next time they go back, they don't want to wear the same thing. And I do that with poetry, the list of poems, so I don't want to go read the same poems next time I go to Halifax or whatever. But keep writing, keep whatever it is, important.
And Mark Dory asked, what would you say has changed most about your poetry over the years?
I don't know. Is it funny? I came across a very early poem of mine about 2 years ago now that I'd written at university at Hull when I must have been 18, and I'd gone to Scunthorpe during the summer and worked in a restaurant there as a waiter and written this poem, and it was like quite good. It was sort of funny, and it could have been written yesterday. Which is interesting. And so I look back at some of my early books and the books you got behind you, I think, Nicola, and I look at some of the attitudes one had when you were 20 odd, which maybe look nowadays a bit sexually, insensitive, maybe mannish, boyish, another notch on the sideboard sort of stuff. But that was, I think, changing it. But then that's the man you were at the time, and that's it. That's the young boy writing the young man attitudes. But I think I've always wanted to do it, and you will continue to write. I was thinking you're writing the one poem. My last book was called Joined Up Writing, Nicola. Joined Up Writing. And Joined Up Writing, the title of a poem I wrote called From the first tentative scratch on the wall to the final unfinished hurried scrawl, one poem. So we all write one poem. And since woman first picked up and wrote that first word on a cave to the final poem, that's the final word that's written in the poem that ends the world, it's one poem. We're all writing the one poem about the world in which we live. The musicians, they're writing that one song. It's probably better than that. I don't know.
It's a beautiful thought, really. Going
And we
back
all are, by the way. And we all are, by the way. It's not my poem. We're all writing. We are all, as poets, writing that poem. So get out there and write it.
out and write it. Well, that would be something to take away. You mentioned about being a working class writer and the things people said at that time. And of course, we've just this week had the Common People report about the barriers for working class writers. Do you think those same barriers are there now? Do you think it's harder? I mean, you came out a particular moment with the Mersey.
Yeah, it's hard. It's always hard, and it was hard then. In fact, there were no. We were helped, Nicola, by the fact that Liverpool at the time. You think, well, without the Beatles, had the Beatles not drawn attention, had the publishers not been drawn to Liverpool by what was going on there, would the Mersey Sound have happened? I think it would. I think Brian, as a poet, myself, Adrian Hay, we're all poets. Separately would have gone on doing, because that's what we wanted to do. So we were writers. There was we had to find our ways of doing it in a way. Finding publishers was different. All the publishers were down in London, so that was a problem. And they're a bit sniffy, and they're inundated. Nowadays, there are different ways of getting your poems across, but to try and get people to read them other than your own group is always a problem. But just you write your poem and it's going to be good. Hopefully, someone will read it, and my daughter writes poetry, and my sons write poetry, and they give them to their friends, and they keep it quiet. I just discovered about some of my daughter's poems. It's really good, but she doesn't tell me. She doesn't show me really. I just want to, but I didn't realise that's lovely. And just to be able to write them to give them to people for their birthday, and it's cheaper than buying perfume, for God's sake.
Yeah, I remember my daughter said that too. And you're very generous. I know people who want to be poets. I remember many years ago when my 7-year-old then wanted to be a poet, and I asked you to sign for him a copy of your Wicked poems, and you signed it to Wicked Mossy from another poet. He was so sadly has gone into big tech, but we don't need to go into that.
Yeah, just hard to make money. Yeah, good luck.
Someone asked, have you ever written a poem in pure scouse?
Yeah. Well, a lot of things like, yes, I mean, I'm an ordinary fella 6 days of the week, but Saturday turn into a football freak. I'm a schizo fanatic, sad, but it's true. One half of me is red, the other half's blue. There's a poem called The Schizo Fanatic about a guy who can't decide whether to be a Liverpudlian or an Evertonian, which is sort of unimaginable, but that's quite fun. Yeah, I used to do that. Yeah, I imagine that, and I enjoyed that. And in fact, my language I use is still a rhyme with a flat A. Bath. I can't say bath. So bath, path, apple. And sometimes people have had actors, saying my lyrics and the rhymes when I was doing the Molière. Good actors there reciting the lines, and of course I would be rhyming all these and they would have problems with that. But it's all right. Okay.
And Fiona Mocklin says she's intrigued by the painting behind you, and it seems to be watching us. And
yes, thank you. Yeah, as I say, it sounds a bit like as if I've arranged to come here, sit in front of this painting. No, that I didn't, because as you know, we came in very quickly. This is a painting of me when I was young by a painter called Sam Walsh, Liverpool painter, sadly gone, but he was at the Liverpool Art College when I was there, and he painted that. He also did a very famous one of Paul McCartney called called Mike's brother. There's another one of me somewhere. There's another one.
Oh yes.
Those of me. My wife goes mad. There's paintings of me everywhere. But I can't help it. Yes, that's Peter Blaine. Sam Walsh, very good.
And Kirsten Allen asked, we were talking about bookshops before, what's your favourite section of a bookshop?
I won't say poetry, obviously. I like, I don't know really. I go in and wander around. I'm put off by all the latest big bestsellers. That always worries me. Avoid that, and all the novels I've written, all the memoirs. I can't keep one. Science, not science, psychiatry, travel, poetry, children's section, travel, poetry. What do you have? Does our questioner have her favourite?
She hasn't told us what it is, and we probably don't have time to ask now because I've got another question for you just before we go. You're a council member of the Society of Authors. What does the Society of Authors mean to you? What's the importance of it for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because from the same reason that I joined the Poetry Society years ago, and as in Liverpool, I joined the Poetry Society in a sense, as a sense of belonging to something, rather than being a poet and on your own and am I a poet? So you join something like that. At the time, I thought I was joining a sort of brotherhood of fellow poets, and we'd all help each other and get on it. It doesn't quite work like that because you realize there are divisions and there are schisms and there are something. But that's all right. No, not true. No, the author side, not like that. The author is less so actually. But I mean, and I almost wish I'd joined it earlier because it would have come in more helpful. But at times when I was sort of dealing with agents or public, I know what to ask. If I feel with the author society that there's someone on the end of a phone, the end of an email that I can get in touch with if I have a problem. And I had more problems when I was younger and as a younger writer, and I think it's more and more important. I mean, that you're most people young or old in the society. Yeah. I mean, it's important, I think, to get in at the beginning and test it out. I never use it properly yet. I should use it more. I mean, use your.
We are.
I know you because I know you're very skillful in what you do, Nicola. I'm a big fan of you, as you know. But over the years.
I wanted to. I mean, we're probably running out of time now. And do you have one last poem for us before we go?
Yeah. Okay. Do you want? Can I do another? Oh, do you want a kids one or a dark one?
Oh, I want both of those.
All right. I do the dark one. And it's about being in lockdown. I talked about mining a poem before. Well, I'd written a poem this in the 70s about when the nuclear disaster was happening and the press of a button all be dead. And people were building their fallout shelters. And you went to that. And this is the version of that for today. It's called Father Knows Best. In my cellar, I've enough food for at least 6 months. Medicines, Wi-Fi, video games, and a chemical toilet. No room on this island for Shakespeare or the Bible. Under lock and key, the tools necessary for a life after death. I've carried out my instructions to the letter. Most evenings I'm down here checking the stores, masks, breathing apparatus, cleaning and polishing. My wife, bless her, thinks I'm obsessive, like other men about cars or football. But deep down she understands. I've no hobbies. My sole interest is survival. Every few weeks we have what I call DD, or disaster drill. At the sound of the alarm, we each go about our separate duties, disconnecting services, switching off the mains, filling the casks with fresh water, etc. Mine is to oversee everything before finally shooting the dog. This I mime in private. At first, the kids enjoyed the days and nights spent below. It was an adventure. But soon they became bored and began to question the project. Mutterings about community care for the elderly, the poor and the like. But I'm firm. Father knows best, and soon enough they'll grow to thank me. Beneath my bunk I keep an Armalite rifle, loaded and ready to use one fine day, when panicking neighbours and so-called friends try to clamber aboard. The ones who scoff, who ignore the signs. I have my orders. There'll be no stowaways, no gate crashes at my party. A party starting soon. And the sooner the better. Like a grounded astronaut, I grow daily more impatient. I'm on tenterhooks. On my knees each night, I pray for closure. Ask Gaia to get on with it. I fear sometimes she has forsaken us. We, her favourite children, meek, drilled, and ready to inherit an earth newly cleansed. I scan the headlines, watch the screen. The latest outbreak, violence on the streets, mass burials. Saddened, of course, but thrilled at the prospect of a new eco-world order. From the children's bedroom, a cough, persistent and unsettling. My wife rushes in. I rise and go to the cellar, double lock the door.
That is pretty dark, but brilliant.
God.
You better give us the children's one. So we
Okay, yes, yeah, this is yeah, sure. It's called Wild Stallions. I wish my poems used foul language, not afraid to get up and fight. Instead of mumbling in the darkness, they could set the whole world alight. I wish my poems would point fingers, exposing the liars and the fools. I wish they'd run free like wild stallions, instead of being tethered like mules. I wish my poems would go crazy, naked, run riot in the street. Instead of serenading the moon, go dancing on Mars in bare feet. I wish my poems would play dirty, speak out and break all the rules. I wish they'd run free like wild stallions instead of being tethered like mules. I wish my poems would turn tables on those who bang them and shout, bring shame on the duckers and divers, name them and drive them all out. I wish my poems were too dangerous, be published or recited in schools. I wish they'd run free like wild stallions instead of being tethered like mules.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Roger, for giving us some time. You're so frank, you're so funny, you're so charming. You shared poems we hadn't heard before. Thank you for, on behalf of myself.
Thank you all for coming. Yeah.
Thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you to everyone who listened in. We've still got 194 people listening, I think. Again, to remind people that all our sessions are free, but if you could give some money to the emergency fund, that would be great. And don't forget to join us at the same time next week when we'll be having tea with Vaseem Khan. If you head to the Society of Authors events, you can see our other events. There's still spaces available. One of the great things about having virtual teas, Roger didn't have to limit it to how big his house was. We could have as many people as we wanted. And yeah, thank you all. I'm going to try a technical screen sharing thing here, but let me off if it doesn't work. And thank you so much.
I think